We've now got our contract in a pretty good spot, and I think we've written just about all the functions that it needs at this point. So it's now time for us to start pivoting and putting some attention into the front end of our application. I haven't really said a whole lot about the front end that we're going to build, so I want to now give you a little bit more information about it. I want to build a front end to our application that is very similar, or at least somewhat similar, to Kickstarter, in especially one regard. Particularly, I want to make sure that the front end application that you and I build has support for multiple different campaigns. If I go over to Kickstarter.com right now and get a listing of all the different active projects, you'll see that there are currently 36,000 projects. All this time, you and I have been writing code to model one individual project or one single campaign. So it seems to me like we need to put a little bit of thought on how we're going to take this one single campaign and somehow replicate it up to 36,000 times inside the application that you and I are going to make. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the different approaches and methodologies that we can use to handle deploying this one singular contract right here multiple times. Before we start that discussion, there's one quick thing that I want to remind you about deploying a contract. Whenever we deploy a contract, we are deploying an instance of it to the network. In this case, maybe the Rinkeby blockchain or the Rinkeby network. For every single instance of a contract that you and I deploy, we get back one very unique address. So here's an address here. If we deploy another instance, maybe we get a totally different address over here, a different address over here, and a totally different address over here. The thing to keep in mind here is that each of these addresses are completely divorced and separate from each other. In other words, if we deploy two instances of the campaign contract, there is absolutely no linkage, no connection between them whatsoever. So if I want to show my users a list of these 4 campaigns, that means that after deploying each of these contracts, I need to write down this address, I need to record it, and then anytime I want to show people information about these contracts, I need to go and retrieve information from each of these respective addresses. So that definitely sounds like quite the undertaking, right? It sounds like that's quite a bit of work. Well, I'm going to show you in this video a couple of different ways that we can approach this problem. So let's get to it. All right, so here is a very quick mock-up of what our application might eventually look like. Our application is going to look way better than this, don't worry, but at least this will give you some rough idea of what we're thinking about. Whenever a user comes to our product, I want them to see a listing of all the different campaigns. And like we just said, each of these campaigns will be coming from a very different address. So it seems to me like that deployment process, like the process of creating a new instance of our contract, is something that we want to have a very good understanding of. Like you and I want to really know what happens and how we're going to deploy these new campaigns, because every time we do a campaign, we have to record the resulting address. Otherwise, how are we going to get the information on the screen? We have to have the address to show details about all of our campaigns inside of our product. So again, I think it all really comes down to how we deploy our contracts. Specifically, I think it comes down to the functionality of this create campaign button. So we're going to look at a couple of different diagrams that show you 3 possible things that could happen, or 3 possible paths that we could take of handling a user clicking on this create campaign button. So let's look at these 3 different ways, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of each one. All right, so let's imagine that a user clicks on that create campaign button, and we want to do 2 things when the user clicks that button. First off, we want to deploy a new instance of our contract, and we want to make sure that we get that address so that we can show that new campaign on the screen to all of our other users after it has been created. So in other words, if we deploy campaign C, I want to get the address from a user deploying that new campaign and show it on the screen to everyone else. So here's solution number 1 that we could take. We could say that a user clicks on the create campaign button, and then maybe we take our contract source code and we send it down to the user's browser. Then inside the user's browser, we could use a combination of Web3 and MetaMask to deploy a new instance of our contract. When the user deploys this contract from their browser, they will get back an address, right? That's what happens when you do the deployment. You get back an address. So after the user deploys the contract, they take that address and they send it back to us. So they send it like maybe back to our server or something that you and I control. We then take that address and we publish it very publicly on our site as a brand new campaign. So maybe during this entire process, the user just created campaign C. When we get the address for campaign C, we then add it to the listings of all the different campaigns that we are currently managing on our platform. So this is solution number one right here. This is one possible way of resolving the problem of kind of handling all these different addresses floating around. Solution number one, however, has one gigantic issue, one big security hole in it. Probably others, but I'm going to show you one particularly very large one. Let's imagine that we have a very malicious user, and maybe this is a very clever malicious user. So maybe when this user clicks on Create Campaign, we send the user our contract source code, but then maybe just before deploying the contract, maybe our user modifies the contract source code in some fashion. For example, maybe they remove the entire approvals system or the entire requests system. So maybe anytime someone sends some money into their brand new campaign C, it automatically gets funneled directly back to that user, back to this malicious user right here. Anytime we send our user the contract source code and then have them deploy it, we are essentially putting our fate in their hands. They could make changes to that contract, deploy it, and then send us the resulting address. And it would be rather challenging for you and I to figure out whether or not the user had done something malicious during the deployment process. Remember, our platform that we are putting together here, our product, we want to make sure that users have some reasonable ability to trust all the campaigns that have been deployed on our campaign. If it turns out that like half of our campaigns are malicious and will just hijack the user's money, well, no one's going to use our platform. No one's going to create a campaign with us because as far as they know, they're going to be sending their money into nothingness and just instantly get scammed. So it sure seems to me that we do not want to allow our users to ever get a hold of our contract source code. Or maybe a better way of putting it would be to say we don't want to trust our users in having deployed a correct version of our contract. So that's solution number one, and that's just one very easy to point out problem with this solution. Let's now move on to solution number two. So this is one different way of approaching this. So this kind of takes us to the entire opposite end of the spectrum. With solution number one, we said that the user handling the deployment was a big security hole. So maybe with solution number two, we say that whenever a user clicks on this button, Create Campaign, maybe our server or like your account, my account will be used to deploy a brand new campaign. And then we immediately take that address and you and I are 100% confident that we have just deployed a valid contract to the network. We can take that address and we can very confidently display it inside of our application as like say a brand new campaign C over here. So what's the issue with this approach? Well, remember, any single time we create an instance of a contract or any time we deploy a contract, it costs some amount of money. Deployments of contracts are not free, it costs money. So in this solution number two right here, yeah, we get dramatically increased security. However, we also are going to pay for it severely. If a user comes along and clicks on this Create Campaign button like 500 times, well, are we going to get billed for 500 creations of a contract? I sure hope not. Yeah, I definitely hope that's not the case. So it definitely seems like we do not really want to take the burden of paying for the deployment on ourselves. So it kind of seems to me like we need some intermediary or some kind of hybrid approach between solution number one and solution number two. Let's take a pause right now. We're going to come back in the next video and we're going to talk about this hybrid solution that we're going to use for deploying our campaigns.